Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Archana Solanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this evening. Sensex and Nifty failed to hold early gains. The mid-cap see sharper cuts. Rupee falls to a new low. $1 US is now worth more than nearly 88 rupees. 70% of market participants polled by CNBC-TV18 expect a 25 basis point rate cut from the RBI tomorrow. 70% also expect rate cut of at least 75 basis points in this cycle. 60% are betting on the RBI to announce additional liquidity measures in what will be the new Governor Sanjay Malhotra's first policy. China challenges the new US tariffs at the World Trade Organization and accuses the Trump administration of bullying. Stock markets across the world attempt to rebound. Gold prices remain near record highs. Uproar in Parliament after US government releases a video of Indian nationals in handcuffs and chains being deported. External Affairs Minister says India is engaging with the US to ensure deportees are not ill-treated. Also promises to crack down on the agents facilitating illegal immigration. Shares of State Bank of India decline after third quarter margins shrink to a 30-month low. Deposit growth rises by just 2% sequentially, but asset quality improves and slippages drop to a 2-year low. Hexaware all set to return to the Raj Street with the 8,700 crore rupee IPO, the largest by an IT company till date. Private equity player Carlyle will be diluting more than 20% of its stake, taking its shareholding to just over 74%. More than 100 employees at the Samsung plant on the outskirts of Chennai are up in arms once again, demand the reinstatement of 3 workers who were suspended for alleged connections with the workers' union. Madras High Court has allowed the union to register workers. The head of United Nations warns against ethnic cleansing after US President Donald Trump proposed to own the Gaza Strip and resettle Palestinians elsewhere. Even US allies like Germany, UK and many countries including Saudi Arabia, Turkey, China and Brazil have rejected Trump's proposal. All right, let's start with the market action. Sensex and Nifty failed to hold early gains to end the day in the red. Sensex lost over 180 points and is barely clinging on to the 78,000 mark. Nifty lost nearly 100 points. Mid-caps saw sharper cuts with the mid-cap index losing 680 points. Financial stocks managed to buck the downtrend with the Nifty Bank index ending in the green. Right, in the money market, the rupee hit a new low against the US dollar. The rupee weakened by about 11 paisa today. $1 US is now almost worth 88 rupees. 10-year bond prices and the yields remain largely flat ahead of the RBI monetary policy decision tomorrow. 70% of market participants polled by CNBC-TV18 are expecting a 25 basis point rate cut from the RBI tomorrow, while 60% are betting on the RBI to announce additional liquidity measures in what will be the new Governor Sanjay Malhotra's first policy. Now, Ritu Singh is here with the report.
For the first time in nearly 5 years, the Reserve Bank of India could kick off a rate-cutting cycle, making Governor Sanjay Malhotra's debut policy meeting one of the most closely watched in recent history. Now, RBI has been injecting massive liquidity into the banking system in recent days, which some interpret as a precursor to a rate cut, despite the relatively high inflation. So the CNBC-TV18 monetary policy poll shows 70% of market participants and economists are betting on a 25 basis point rate cut this time, driven by the need to support growth. But ignoring the rupee's depreciation can prove tricky, which is why 30% of the respondents still voted for a dovish hold. Now, liquidity remains tight in the system, but a cash reserve ratio cut at this point seems unlikely. But 60% of the respondents do expect additional liquidity easing measures like more OMOs, longer duration repos, or a cut in the incremental CRR for NRI deposits. Of course, markets will also watch closely for any clarity on the new LCR norms, which are set to kick in from the 1st of April. Now, external factors are going to add a lot of complexity to this policy. RBI is likely to acknowledge the risk from the tariff threats and stay nimble, but a small section of the market believes that inflationary tariffs and a weakening rupee could be used as an argument to push out rate cuts. But the broader consensus is RBI will allow a gradual rupee adjustment while ensuring stability. Now, markets are already pricing in steeper rate cuts beyond February, with most expecting anywhere between 75 to 100 basis points cut in this cycle to give a helping hand to growth. Now, despite these expectations of rate cuts, the monetary policy stance is likely to be left unchanged at neutral. But as for the tone, 40% do anticipate a dovish tilt, while the majority expect it to be neutral. Now, growth expectations are softening. 90% of our respondents predict that RBI will lower its FY25 GDP forecast to 6.4 to 6.5%. That could further strengthen the case for easing. But the inflation forecast is unlikely to be tinkered with in this policy. So all eyes are going to be on Governor Malhotra's debut policy move. Will he pull the trigger on a rate cut or stay cautious amid global risks? The stakes are high and the markets are going to be watching.
Right, the markets are going to be watching. Thank you, Ritu, for that. Lata Venkatesh is here with on what we can expect from the governor's first policy.
Well, it's one of the most awaited monetary policies, and the rate cut is priced in. The ubiquitous question is, rate cut hai aur kya? That's the question. Will there be a CRR cut? More than a CRR cut, the market is going to watch for whether he says, I will give liquidity as and when required, or whether he says, I will keep the liquidity surplus. So the difference between adequate and ample liquidity will be very much watched. Another question that people will watch is there a rate cut in April? Is he signaling more dovishness? That's not priced in yet. And then about the regulations. You know, the RBI has been pulling banks from not growing credit too fast till deposit catches up. They have been unhappy about the credit deposit ratio being high. Do they say, okay, now the credit deposit ratio is fine? That will be much watched. And then, of course, the three big regulations that are expected: the liquidity coverage ratio LCR rules, the ECL, expected credit loss rules, and the higher provisioning for infrastructure projects. Does he postpone all of them in no uncertain terms? That's what people will watch out for. And finally, an expectation, a hope, that the higher risk weight on NBFC loans, it was raised from 100 to 125%. Will that be reduced? These are the things people are waiting for, much more than the rate cut, which is priced in. Well, my own two-bit, the governor is unlikely to say, I will keep liquidity surplus. He has to worry about the rupee. Nor can he easily signal a rate cut in April as well, because then people will short the rupee. It becomes cheaper to short the rupee and go into dollars. He will, of course, clarify on LCR, saying that, you know, this is wartime. You don't bring out structural reforms at a time like this, so he will definitely defer them. But asking for a reduction in risk weights on NBFC loans, which banks give NBFCs, I doubt that will be there. So, looks like the market will have something to cheer, but let's see.
Thank you, Lata, for that. Moving on, China has accused the United States of making false allegations about its role in the fentanyl trade to justify tariffs on Chinese products. The complaint has been lodged with the World Trade Organization. In the filing, China said that the measures were discriminatory and protectionist and violated trade rules. WTO's settlement framework allows 60 days for dispute consultations, after which China has the right to adjudication by a panel of judges. And staying with China and the US Postal Service has agreed to resume accepting shipments from China and Hong Kong. This comes less than 12 hours after announcing it would stop doing so. The Postal Service said it's working with Customs Department to implement an efficient collection mechanism for the new China tariffs to ensure the least disruption to package delivery. Now, the move comes amidst tariff war between the two countries. All right, the big story back home: uproar in Parliament after the US government released a video of Indian nationals in chains and handcuffs being deported back to India after trying to enter US illegally. A video posted online by the US Border Protection Force showed Indians being boarded into the military aircraft. The video has music overlaid on it and shows people in chains and handcuffs. The head of the US Border Patrol called it successful deportation of illegal aliens to India. This was the farthest deportation undertaken by using a military plane. Opposition parties protested what they called inhuman treatment of the Indian nationals by the US. Now, opposition lawmakers, including Congress leader Rahul Gandhi, protested outside the parliament. Some wore handcuffs and carried placards that read, "Humans, not prisoners." External Affairs Minister Jaishankar said India is engaging with the US to ensure deportees are not ill-treated. He also promised to crack down on the agents facilitating illegal migration.
Deportations by the US are organized and executed by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE authorities. The standard operating procedure for deportation by aircraft used by ICE, that is effective from 2012. I repeat, that is effective from 2012, provides for the use of restraints. However, we have been informed by ICE that women and children are not restrained.
जब हम वहाँ पे पहुँचे, वहाँ की गवर्नमेंट ने कोई भी एक्शन, जैसे हम कोई भी एक्शन लेते हैं, लीगली एक्शन लेते हैं, हमारी सुनवाई होती है, ऐसे कोई सुनवाई नहीं करने दी है। कोई हमारे बयान नहीं हुए, कोई हमने लॉयर वगैरह नहीं हमारा हुआ, तो उन्होंने हमसे बिना पूछे कि तुम क्यों आए हो, क्यों अपनी कंट्री छोड़ी है, हमसे कुछ नहीं, हम शरण मांगने गए थे, कुछ वैसा नहीं, हम क्रिमिनल नहीं है। उन्होंने ऐसा ट्रीट किया, हमें एक जंजीरें बांध के, जैसे हाथों में जंजीरें और पैरों में जंजीरें, लेडीज़ बच्चों जो 18 साल से हैं, 18 साल से ऊपर हैं, सबको जंजीरें बांध के।
बहुत बातें की गई कि मोदी जी, ट्रंप जी बहुत अच्छे मित्र हैं और मोदी जी ने ऐसे क्यों होने दिया? क्या हम अपना जहाज़ नहीं भेज सकते थे उनको लेने के लिए? इस तरह से क्या इंसानों के साथ बर्ताव किया जाता है कि उनको हथकड़ियाँ पहना के, बेड़ियाँ पहना के भेजा यहाँ पे?
Prime Minister Modi is speaking in the Rajya Sabha. Let's cut across.
जिस प्रकार से बदलाव नजर आ रहा है, फल के रूप में हम अनुभव करने लगे हैं। हमारे गवर्नेंस का भी मूल मंत्र यही रहा है, सबका साथ, सबका विकास। हमारी ही सरकार ने SC, ST एक्ट को मजबूत बनाकर दलित और आदिवासी समाज के सम्मान और उनके सुरक्षा के संबंध में अपनी प्रतिबद्धता भी दिखाई और हमने उसको बढ़ाया। आदरणीय सभापति जी, आज जातिवाद का जहर फैलाने के लिए भरपूर प्रयास हो रहा है, लेकिन 3 दशक तक दोनों सदन के ओबीसी एमपीस और सभी दलों के ओबीसी एमपीस सरकारों से मांग करते रहे थे कि ओबीसी आयोग को संवैधानिक दर्जा दिया जाए।
Right, shares of State Bank of India declined after third quarter margins shrunk to a 30-month low. Now, deposit growth rose by just 2% sequentially. However, asset quality improved and slippages dropped to a 2-year low. Abhishek Kothari is here with more. Abhishek, tell us more about the bank's performance.
Well, SBI's result was weak on the net interest margin front, and that disappointed massively. So overall net interest margin is at 14-quarter low. The domestic net interest margin is at 15-quarter low, while the international net interest margin is at 7-quarter low. What's not worked in the net interest margin is that despite loan growth being healthy, they have not been able to command on the yield side, and that's impacted them. So the deposit growth was only 10% YOY and about 2% sequentially, but their interest outgo or interest expense growth was much higher. So cost to income ratio is at 4-quarter high of 55.1% versus 48.5% in the previous quarter. On the positive side, the credit deposit ratio is at 23-quarter high. The annualized slippage ratio, that is the quarterly annualized slippage ratio, is at 9-quarter low of 0.4% versus 0.5% in the previous quarter. Analysts were working with a higher slippage ratio this time around. So their asset quality is the best in last 10 years or even more. Gross NPA ratio has declined to 2.07% versus 2.13% in the previous quarter. Robust fee income growth. Fee income has grown higher than the overall loan growth also. So it's grown at 16.4% YOY and close to 6.5% sequentially. With reference to the PNL to ARPOL, the NII was 2.7% below ARPOL. However, the profit was higher by 5% to ARPOL. Back to you.
Right, thank you, Abhishek, for that. On that note, we'll slip into a short break. Coming up next, more than 100 employees at the Samsung plant on the outskirts of Chennai are up in arms against. And more details when we return. Welcome back. Kia India has paid 278 crore rupees to the tax department as it faces a probe over alleged tax evasion. Now, sources have told CNBC-TV18 that tax authorities have demanded that Kia pay 1,351 crore rupees as liability for misclassification of imports. Now, Timsi Jaipuria joins us with the details. Timsi, Kia is the second auto major to be handed a tax notice in the span of 1 week. What are your sources telling you?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, Kia India has paid 278 crore rupees to the tax department, even as it faces a probe over alleged tax evasion. That's what sources have told us. Now, sources further indicated that the tax authorities have demanded that Kia India must pay 1,351 crore rupees as the liability for misclassification of imports. The company has voluntarily deposited this 278 crore rupees with the tax authorities against this total liability of 1,351 crore rupees, and Kia has paid part of this liability, even as currently it says that it is pursuing legal options. Just to remind our viewers, Finance Ministry had issued a show cause notice to Kia India on 8th of April 2024 for a period of duty evasion which is between July 2019 till February 2024. And this total liability of 1,351 crore rupees includes 1,278 crore rupees as the unpaid duty and 78 crore rupees as the interest on it. And Kia has been accused of importing components in separate consignments in order to avail lower duty benefits. Authorities say that the Kia separated import consignments to avail lower duty of 10 to 15% rather than it is actually liable to pay 30 to 35% since these are part of CKD consignments, that is completely knockdown consignments. Kia India, meanwhile, told CNBC-TV18 that as a responsible and law-abiding brand, Kia India is committed to following all regulatory requirements in our operations. We have consistently cooperated with the authorities whenever required, and we remain dedicated to ensuring complete transparency thought out at all processes. Meanwhile, regarding the current matter, we have already filed a detailed response supported by comprehensive evidence and documentation to substantiate our stand. However, as the issue is currently under consideration of the relevant authorities, we would not be able to comment further to provide any additional details on the matter as of now. End of quote. However, they also said that they completely remain committed to the due processes and regulations. So let's see what happens finally. Like you mentioned, this is the second auto major. First auto major, Volkswagen, has already reached the High Court, Bombay High Court, challenging the demand. We need to see what is the stand that Kia India takes. Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Timsi, for that update. Moving on, more than 100 employees at a Samsung plant on the outskirts of Chennai are up in arms once again. Now, protesting employees demand the reinstatement of 3 workers who were suspended for alleged connections with the workers' union. Now, Jude Saneth has more details from the protest site.
The latest face-off between employees and management at Samsung's Sriperumbudur plant just outside Chennai have surfaced days after 3 employees of the plant were suspended by the company for allegedly engaging in activities deemed detrimental to the interests of the South Korean electronics giant and its operations in India. In fact, we're coming to you just a few meters from the plant itself, where, as you can see, a line of company buses and barricades have been erected so as to ensure that members of the public don't quite see the scale of the sit-in protests occurring just beyond this line of vehicles. But what we have been told is that well over 100 employees have been sitting in on protests demanding that these 3 employees be reinstated after their suspension itself. Now, interestingly enough, employees and members of the Samsung India Workers Union have claimed that the suspension has taken place not on account of disciplinary reasons, but simply because these employees were members of the recently registered Samsung India Workers Union. They've also claimed that Samsung does not quite want any on-ground representation of their employees engaging in any union activities, at least on campus. However, in a statement, Samsung said, and I quote, "The employees in question violated the company policy and have been suspended temporarily and will be subject to appropriate disciplinary action following a formal inquiry," end quote. Remember, this isn't the first time that issues have cropped up between Samsung's management and employees. Back in September, well over 1,100 employees staged a protest outside the plant, demanding for better representation, better pay and privileges that they said every employee deserves, post which Samsung agreed to some, if not many, of these demands. However, what we are picking up from the ground is that a breakdown between Samsung and its employees has now taken place with regard to these demands, and more importantly, with regard to representation by way of the union, these employees allege, while Samsung says this is more on account of a disciplinary issue which will be resolved or a verdict will be passed by a disciplinary committee in a few days from now.
Right, with that's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. More news and updates continue right here.